Welcome to the Recruitment Podcast. Today we are with Pau Labarta, expert in machine learning. Welcome, Pau. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me on this podcast. And well, first of all, I'm not a machine learning expert because no one is an expert. But I've been in the field for almost 10 years. So I studied maths. So back in university, I was interested in solving problems with numbers. So around 10 years ago, which is when these buzzwords of data science, data engineering, machine learning really started to catch momentum, then I asked myself, what's this thing called data science? Because when I was in university, that didn't exist. And then when you scratch a little bit the surface, you realize that it's something like a nice mix between mathematics and computation. So, and at the end of the day, you're trying to solve some more or less real-world problems. So it's at the intersection of things that, let's say, I was good at and things that I was interested in. So that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, machine learning engineers are people who enjoy solving problems using computers and using data, and this is what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to teach people through my courses.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I used to work as a machine learning engineer for years, and then I was changing projects. I was originally working in a conventional 9-to-5 for the same employer, and then I realized in order to learn faster, I needed to change projects more often, and then is when I started freelancing. And then during 3 years freelancing, I had the chance to try different problems, different industries. All the time was using machine learning techniques, but then the underlying problems were different. Like, for example, trying to predict, this will need to be edited. But for example, building models to predict how people order food online. So you need to distribute the fleet that supplies that food. So something like got really popular lately. But at the end of the day, I realized that what I enjoyed the most was the process of learning something new and then using it to solve a problem. But as soon as I had learned that, I was getting a little bit bored. So then is when I understood my passion is actually teaching what I learned. So this is when I said, okay, let's try to repackage everything I've learned by doing. Let's actually teach people how to do that. And this is how I started making free content online and then eventually courses because I need to pay a mortgage. So.
What is machine learning actually for LAIX?
Yeah, I mean, machine learning is another way to build software. So let's say 20 years ago, software engineers were building programs like that were very specified beforehand. So that was the traditional way to build programs. So for example, how can I say that? For example, in social media platforms, in Facebook 30 years ago, which already existed, yeah, Facebook is very old, there were things on the app which were designed by designers, but they were just the way they were because of no particular reason. For example, the icons. So there are a lot of elements when you use Facebook, the app, that were originally there, but then they were set without really thinking if that's the best way to actually get people engaged with the application. So this is when they said, why don't we collect data of what people actually do with the application and try to understand that data? Maybe by analyzing this data, we can actually understand what people like and what keeps people active and using the app more often. So this is when they started building these software systems that are fed with data to try to predict, that's the word, to suggest what's the best way to present, let's say, icons or colors or things on the Facebook feed so that people stay longer in the app. And this is the whole idea of machine learning. This is just a very particular, let's say, application, which gets a little bit perverse because the end goal is a little bit bad. But machine learning is used in any discipline where you collect enough data so that you can understand a phenomenon. For example, for meteorology, to predict the weather, at the end of the day, what do? They collect data constantly, and using this data, they find patterns in the data and say, okay, if temperature yesterday was between this range and humidity was that range, the chances of tomorrow raining are 70%. And these are all patterns that you can extract automatically from the data using these machine learning algorithms. And the job of a machine learning engineer is to build these systems. So,
Do you have any advice for the people who like to learn machine coding?
what are the skills? That's actually a very interesting question, because the thing is that there are two layers, in my opinion. There are the specific tools that you use for different things, and the tools are very volatile. They come and go, they change. And then there are these underlying design principles. So how do you actually solve these machine learning problems in the real world? So in my opinion, to work in that field, you need to combine both. So you need to first understand the big picture, which is what I try to put an emphasis on when I teach people. So how do you design the system? How do you understand which kind of system you need to design based on the real world business problem you need to solve? So what are the business metrics that you should try to target, try to predict, try to optimize? And starting from that, go back and solve what's the picture of the system, and obviously implement it. So when it comes to implementation, you need to know the tools, you need to know certain programming languages, which, I mean, for machine learning, it's 99% just Python. But then you go basically from the big picture to the low-level technicalities. And I think to work in that field, at least you need to show certain competency doing everything. Otherwise, even the classical role of a programmer is actually not that interesting anymore, because, as you mentioned, LLMs is a technology which is basically a productivity booster. So people who are good at coding get 10 times better good at coding. But you need to understand enough, right? So I think you need to get the good picture, and you also need to be willing to put some time to actually implement stuff, because it's an engineering discipline, and try to learn by building stuff.
What are the current skills in demand?
Yes, the first thing is that for newcomers, and even for people who are in the industry, who've been there for a while, it's overwhelming, because there's a mixture of course, there are a lot of new things happening, especially since these generative models became so popular, LLMs and so on. But there is this sense of it's overwhelming, there's too much information, and there's somehow a paralysis. There are so many choices that you don't know where to start from. So my recommendation, which is what I myself apply still today when I need to learn something new, is you start with very specific projects and you learn by implementing stuff. So instead of going through a long curriculum of I need to learn maths, and then I need to learn programming, and I need to learn stuff, you don't start from learning everything. You start with focusing with very specific goals, and you base your learning on building projects. Because in my experience, and what I've seen from my students, most people are really good at collecting online course certificates, which was okay a few years ago, but now the bar has raised. And to really understand things and to actually stand out from the crowd, you need to build stuff. So you need to put some time, you need to be willing to sit in front of the computer and have a hard time trying to make it work. And when you make it work, you publish in social media, and you share it. So you also promote yourself a little bit, showing what you built. This is a very nice way to do something which most people don't do. They say they'll do, very few people actually do, and you will also learn a lot, which is really important to overcome what I call the elephant in the room in machine learning, which is this impostor syndrome. Because there are so many things which are new coming out that no one is an expert. And you feel constantly the urge to actually relearn stuff. Otherwise, you are out of the game. So yeah, put some time, build something, get frustrated, get back the next day, do it at the end, and then share it.